Welcome to 10 Chapters Audiobooks. Stories that are short enough to finish, deep enough to feel.
Seasons of Emma, Chapter 2. The Sketchbook. The next morning, the city had transformed. Snow had fallen steadily through the night, blanketing the streets in a pristine, undisturbed white. The usual sharp edges of New York seemed softened, muted, as if the city itself had taken a deep breath and paused. Emma stood by her apartment window, coffee warming her hands, watching the world stir to life. The rhythmic crunch of tires over snow and the faint scrape of shovels carried through the air. Pedestrians shuffled along the sidewalks, their heads bowed against the cold, bundled in scarves and thick coats. It was a rare, fleeting stillness, and for a moment, Emma let herself sink into it. Her eyes drifted to the kitchen counter, where the sketchbook sat. Its leather cover caught the pale winter light, a stark contrast to the clean white of her countertop. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about it, or the stranger who had left it behind. I shouldn't have opened it, she thought, guilt flickering in her chest. But curiosity had taken hold last night, and the images she had found inside still lingered in her mind. They weren't just drawings, they were windows into another world. Another mind. Emma set her coffee down and crossed the room. Her fingers brushed the sketchbook's cover as she picked it up, the leather smooth and warm from the morning sun. She hesitated, her heart racing slightly, then flipped it open. The first drawing greeted her like an old friend. A street vendor, his face lit with a warm, toothy smile, handed a hot dog to a child bundled in a puffy coat. The scene was alive with detail, the steam rising from the cart, the child's tiny mittens, the faint reflection of the vendor's silhouette on the wet pavement. The artist had captured not just the image, but the energy, the emotion of the moment. Emma turned the pages slowly, each one more mesmerizing than the last. A saxophonist in the subway, eyes closed, lost in his music. The Brooklyn Bridge bathed in moonlight, its reflection rippling in the East River. A woman waiting at a crosswalk, her scarf trailing in the wind. The sketches were alive, vibrant, brimming with a kind of love for the world that Emma found both beautiful and heartbreaking. Near the back of the sketchbook, she found the portraits. The same young woman appeared again and again, a muse, it seemed, for the artist. Her dark curls framed a mischievous smile, her eyes bright with some secret joy. In one drawing, she sat on a park bench, laughing, her head thrown back, as if the world had told her the best joke. In another, she leaned against a fire escape, her expression soft and wistful, gazing out over the city. Emma couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. Whoever this woman was, she had clearly been important to the artist. The tenderness in the lines, the way her features were drawn with such care, it all spoke of a connection that went beyond mere observation. Finally, Emma reached the last page. The phrase was there, scrawled in delicate handwriting. Some places hold the echoes of what we're searching for. Her fingers traced the words, as if the act might bring her closer to their meaning. "What are you searching for, Leo?" she thought. "And why does it feel like I'm part of it?" The thought startled her, and she snapped the sketchbook shut. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. But the idea lingered, refusing to be dismissed. By the time the afternoon sun began to melt the edges of the snow, Emma had made up her mind. She bundled up in her thickest coat and scarf, pulled on her boots, and tucked the sketchbook into her bag. She would return it. Someone who poured so much of themselves into their work would be devastated to lose it, and she couldn't bear the thought of keeping it any longer. The icy sidewalks made the short walk to Elliot's Café feel like an adventure. Snow crunched beneath her boots, and the cold bit at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her mind was too preoccupied with rehearsing what she might say if she saw him again. The café was warm and inviting, its windows fogged from the heat inside. Emma pushed open the door, and the familiar chime of the bell above the frame greeted her. The rich aroma of coffee and baked goods enveloped her like a hug, but she barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for the man who had left behind the sketchbook. He wasn't there. Disappointment settled in her chest like a stone as she approached the counter. Dani, the barista, looked up from wiping a tray and grinned. "Hey, back again?" Emma hesitated, her fingers brushing the strap of her bag. "Yeah, I have a weird question. Do you know a guy who comes in here a lot? Dark hair, kind of scruffy, always sketching?" Dani tilted her head, her brow furrowing in thought. "You just described half our regulars," she said with a laugh. "Got anything more specific?" Emma smiled nervously and pulled the sketchbook from her bag, placing it on the counter. "He left this here last night." Dani's eyes widened as she took in the book. "Oh my God, that's his, isn't it? That's Leo's." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Leo," she repeated softly. The name felt right, familiar somehow. "Do you know him?" Dani nodded. "Yeah, he's in here all the time. Quiet guy. Orders black coffee, sits in the corner by the window, and sketches for hours. Doesn't talk much unless you start the conversation." Emma followed Dani's gesture to a table near the back, now empty. She could picture him there, head bent over the sketchbook, pencil moving deftly across the page. "Do you know when he might be back?" Dani shrugged. "Hard to say. Sometimes he's here every day for weeks, and then he disappears for a while. He's unpredictable like that." Her gaze shifted to the sketchbook, and her expression softened. "That thing's his whole world, you know. It's like his soul on paper." The weight of Dani's words settled over Emma, heavy and profound. She tightened her grip on the book. "I was going to leave it here with you, but you can't," Dani finished for her, smirking. "Let me guess. You feel like you need to give it back in person." Emma nodded, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. "I don't know why, but yeah." Dani's smirk widened. "Well, good luck. If I see him, I'll let him know you have it." Back home, the sketchbook sat on the coffee table like an unspoken challenge. Emma tried to distract herself answering work emails, scrolling through her phone, even cleaning out the fridge, but nothing worked. Her thoughts kept circling back to Leo and the world he had created within those pages. The snow outside had turned to slush, and the city lights cast long golden reflections on the wet pavement. Emma curled up on the couch, Pickles purring softly in her lap, and stared at the book. It felt heavier now, as if it carried not just Leo's art, but a piece of his life. Finally, she reached for it. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it again, flipping through the pages with newfound reverence. Each drawing seemed more alive than before, as if the emotions behind them were seeping into her own heart. The laughter of the street vendor, the music of the saxophonist, the quiet strength of the young woman, all of it felt like a thread pulling her closer to something she couldn't quite see. And then, at the very back of the book, she noticed something she hadn't before. Faint, almost invisible against the dark leather of the inside back cover, were a name and an address, written in pencil. Leo Winters, 207 Walker Street. Her breath caught in her throat. The address wasn't far. Maybe a 20-minute walk, 30 if the sidewalks were still icy. Her heart raced as she traced the faint letters with her finger, her mind spinning with possibilities. This was it. She could return the sketchbook, solve the mystery, and finally put this strange chapter behind her. But as she sat there, staring at the address, a new thought crept into her mind. What if this isn't the end? What if it's just the beginning? The weight of the question pressed down on her, heavy and undeniable. She glanced at Pickles, who had stretched out across her lap, his green eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Well, Pickles," she murmured, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Looks like we're going on an adventure. The cat blinked at her, his tail flicking lazily, as if to say, "It's about time." End of Chapter 2. Seasons of Emma, Chapter 3, A Spring Encounter. Weeks passed, and the memory of the mysterious stranger lingered in Emma's mind like a song she couldn't shake. She'd returned to Elliot's Café several times, sketchbook in tow, hoping to see Leo again. Each time, the seat by the window remained empty, and Dani could only offer a sympathetic shrug. "Maybe he's a ghost," Dani joked one afternoon, wiping down the counter. "Just passing through to haunt unsuspecting artists." Emma laughed, but the idea unsettled her. What if she never saw him again? What if he was just a fleeting moment, destined to fade like a half-remembered dream? The thought left her feeling oddly deflated. The sketchbook now sat on her bookshelf, waiting for its owner to claim it, or for Emma to work up the courage to track him down. On a warm evening in late April, Maya dragged Emma to a gallery opening in Soho. The air was alive with the first hints of spring, and the streets buzzed with the hum of people shedding their winter layers. The gallery itself was a small but vibrant space, buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses as well-dressed patrons admired the art on display. Emma wasn't particularly in the mood for socializing, but Maya had insisted. "You need to get out more," Maya said, handing Emma a glass of white wine. "Who knows? You might meet someone interesting." Emma rolled her eyes, sipping her wine. "I've had enough of meeting people, thanks." As they moved through the gallery, Emma found herself drawn to a large painting of the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise. It was breathtaking, the colors vibrant and alive, the brushstrokes bold yet deliberate. The painting had an energy, a sense of movement that made it feel as if the sun were rising before her eyes. Something about it felt familiar, like she'd seen it before, but she couldn't place where. "That one's stunning, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Emma turned, her heart skipping. There he was. Leo, the stranger from the cafe. He looked different now, less bundled against the cold, wearing a fitted black jacket that emphasized his lean frame. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his sharp eyes held a flicker of recognition as they met hers. "It's you!" she blurted out before she could stop herself. He smiled, a slow, easy smile that lit up his face. "You remember me?" Yeah," Emma stammered, heat rising to her cheeks. "You left your sketchbook at Elliot's." His expression shifted, surprise and relief washing over him. "You found it?" "I've been wondering where I left it." "I have it," Emma said quickly. "I've been going back to the cafe, hoping to return it to you." Leo's smile softened. "Well, I guess this is fate then." Before Emma could reply, a woman approached, clipboard in hand. "Leo, we need you up front for the Q&A." He nodded. "Be right there." Turning back to Emma, he said, "Don't go anywhere. I want to talk more." Emma blinked, still processing the revelation. He was the artist. The gallery was showcasing his work. Maya appeared at her side, wide-eyed and clutching her wine glass like a lifeline. "Holy crap, that's Leo Carter?" Maya whispered, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "He's incredible. His stuff is in all the big galleries right now, like New York Times kind of big." Emma stared after him, her mind racing. She hadn't expected this. The quiet stranger from the cafe turning out to be someone so accomplished, so out of her league. When the Q&A ended, Leo returned to find Emma near the refreshment table. He looked more at ease now, his shoulders relaxed. The weight of the evening lifted. "Sorry about that," he said, running a hand through his hair. "The gallery loves making me talk about my work." "You were great," Emma said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. She'd listened intently to his answers, drawn in by the way he spoke about finding inspiration in small, overlooked moments. His voice had carried the same quiet passion that she'd seen in the pages of his sketchbook. "So," Leo said, his tone light, "how much of my sketchbook did you read?" Emma flushed. "Just enough to know you're ridiculously talented." He chuckled, the sound warm and unguarded. "It's not exactly light reading, but I'm glad you held on to it. I'd hate to lose those drawings." "I can bring it to you tomorrow," Emma offered. "Elliot's?" Leo shook his head, pulling a small gallery postcard from his pocket. "How about my art workshop? It's just a few blocks from here. You can see where I work and maybe join in." Emma blinked. "Join in?" "Sure, it's a group thing. Beginners welcome." He grinned, his confidence infectious. "No pressure, of course, but I think you'd enjoy it." The idea caught her off guard. Emma loved sketching, but her art had always been private, a way to process her emotions in solitude. Sharing it with others, even strangers, felt terrifying. But as she looked at Leo, something about his easy confidence, his openness, made her want to take the leap. She nodded slowly. "Okay, why not?" Leo's smile widened, his face lighting up. "Great, here's the address." He scribbled it on the back of the postcard and handed it to her. "Tomorrow, 6 p.m. As Emma left the gallery with Maya, her thoughts were a whirlwind of excitement and nerves. She'd gone from trying to return a forgotten sketchbook to stepping into Leo Carter's world. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she might be stepping into something bigger than herself. The next day, Emma spent the morning in a daze. Her thoughts alternated between the memory of Leo's easy smile and the looming prospect of the workshop. She doubted her skills, worried about being judged, but a part of her, a quiet, persistent voice, urged her to go. By the time evening came, Emma stood outside the address Leo had given her. The building was an old brick warehouse with tall windows that glowed warmly against the dusky sky. She hesitated, clutching the sketchbook to her chest, before taking a deep breath and stepping inside. The workshop space was open and inviting, with long tables covered in art supplies, easels lining the walls, and a faint scent of paint lingering in the air. A handful of people milled about, chatting and setting up their materials. Leo was at the far end of the room, speaking with a woman who looked like she could be a professional curator. When he spotted Emma, his face lit up. "Hey, you made it!" She managed a nervous smile. "Yeah, I brought this." She held out the sketchbook. Leo took it with a look of genuine gratitude. "Thank you. I'm glad it found its way back to me." He opened it, flipping through the pages with a fond expression. "I'd forgotten how much I'd sketched in here." "I didn't peek too much," Emma said quickly, feeling a need to clarify. He grinned. "You're welcome to. Art is meant to be shared, after all." Emma wasn't sure she agreed, but she didn't argue. Leo introduced her to the group, a mix of amateurs and experienced artists, all welcoming in their own way. Over the next 2 hours, Emma found herself sketching alongside them, her initial nerves giving way to a quiet focus. The room buzzed with creativity, and for the first time, she felt the joy of sharing her passion in a community. Leo occasionally walked around, offering advice and encouragement. When he stopped by her table, he studied her work with a thoughtful smile. "You have a great eye for detail," he said. "Don't be afraid to experiment, though. Art is as much about play as it is about precision." Emma nodded, letting his words sink in. She tried loosening her strokes, letting the lines flow more freely. And for the first time, her sketches felt alive, imbued with a sense of motion and emotion that surprised even her. By the end of the evening, Emma felt lighter, like she'd shed a layer of fear she hadn't even realized she was carrying. As the group packed up, Leo walked her to the door. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone warm and genuine. "I hope you'll join us again. Emma looked at him, her heart fluttering. "I think I will." As she stepped out into the crisp spring night, she couldn't help but smile. Something had shifted, like the sun rising over a new horizon. Emma felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. End of chapter 3. Don't forget to like and subscribe for free audiobooks.